What's going on, everyone? Mitesh here, and guys, it's 2021 April, so of course we have new leaks about the Pixel lineup of phones for 2021, including brand new leaks about the Pixel 5a, what it's going to look like, what features are going to be available, and for the Pixel 6, some really interesting news in the fact of what processor it's going to use. So without further ado, let's talk about them. Alright guys, so let's start off with talking about what's going to be the most important phone for most people, that is the Pixel 5a, because let's face it, the Pixel 6, great for Pixel enthusiasts, but not the one that actually sells units. So the Pixel 5a, from the leaks that we've seen from the likes of OnLeaks, we've seen the fact that the Pixel 5a is most likely just going to be like a rebadged version of the Pixel 4a 5G. It's going to have the same exact unibody construction, so it's going to be made out of the same plastic. It's going to have the same exact screen size, and most likely the same exact screen as the Pixel 4a 5G from last year. All of these things are not bad things, including the fact that it's going to have dual cameras. It's the first time we're going to get two cameras on their cheapest Pixel phone out there. So that's exciting. Like getting an ultra-wide camera on the $350 phone that's not garbage, like that's the important part. That's not garbage is really cool. So yeah, the Pixel 5a is exciting, and most likely they will try to hit that $350 price point again. So yeah, that's pretty much what we know about the Pixel 5a so far. But the real question is, what processor is it going to use? Because let's face it, the Pixel 4a 5G used the same processor as the Pixel 5 last year. So is it going to be the same processor from last year? Probably not, because let's face it, Qualcomm really doesn't sell last year's processor. They'll sell you a new processor from this year, and most likely it's going to be, I think, something like the Snapdragon 690. That is, I think, the current favorite among like lower mid-range processors. I know it sounds weird, but it is most likely the one they're going to choose, so it's going to be slightly less powerful than last year's Pixel 4a 5G and the Pixel 5, but it should still be good enough for most people. Oh yeah, and in terms of the date that it's actually going to be released, not really too much is known, but I think they will follow the 2020 schedule, and they will actually release it in August or September before they make their big announcement for the Pixel 6. I think it's a bit of a weird schedule, but I think if that's what they want to do, I mean, that's what they want to do. What can we do about that? But yeah, that is the Pixel 5a, definitely the more important phone and for Pixel lineup of phones, but I think the Pixel 6 has the more interesting announcement. So the thing that we've learned so far in the Pixel 6 is the fact that it's going to use Google's own designed silicon in it. So Google has been designing this processor under the project known as Whitechapel for a while now. It's been known, they've been hiring CPU engineers for a while, and yeah, this year we're finally going to get Google's own designed ARM chips in their own phone. So let's start off by talking about why I think this is an important thing. So Google, depending on their own silicon, is good in the fact that it also gives competition to the big player in the game, which is Qualcomm. Let's face it, every single phone that comes out this year, every flagship phone is going to use the exact same processor because only one company makes a really, really good processor. That's Qualcomm on Android side. There is, of course, the Samsung's Exynos processor, which Samsung uses for some of their own phones. And interesting about the Whitechapel process is that Google is partnering up with Samsung to develop the processor, and they'll also be using them to make the processors themselves. So one of the things that we're seeing out of this is the fact that they're most likely going to share some commonality between Google's homemade chip, which is called GS101, or most likely Google Silicon 101. It's going to share a lot of similarities between the Exynos processor, which for those of you who are in the United States and have never used an Exynos processor, it's very similar to Qualcomm's phones, very similar to Qualcomm's processor, except that usually it's a little bit worse in some ways. Like it's got sometimes worse performance, sometimes it's got worse battery life, sometimes worse thermal issues, but it's usually very comparable in terms of performance, maybe just a little bit slower. We really don't know how Google Silicon will perform. I'm a little skeptical of it myself because of the fact that last year Google went to the 765G, which is a mid-range processor. So I don't know if they're trying to lower our expectations for their Google Silicon, and that, you know, last year's phone, it's going to be faster than last year's phone, which is not a very high bar to cross. But maybe that was their strategic, maybe that was their long play from last year that, hey, when we introduce this new silicon, we want to make sure we beat last year's phone. So let's just lower that bar a little bit. Maybe they decided to do that. But why I think it's important is the fact that it shows that Google is in this for the very long run. Because let's face it, you do not design your own processor unless you're planning to be in it for the long run. Now, Google will most likely use this processor in their own servers and in Chromebooks and things like that. So that is probably the reason that they are spending the money for this, but it is good to know that they are spending the money also for their Pixel lineup of phones and for Android. And one of the other benefits you may get from having Google's own silicon in this thing is the fact that they will be the ones who are controlling the drivers and things like that, so we may get support for Android updates for longer. Like right now, it's very dependent on Qualcomm providing updates, providing drivers so that the new version of Android will work for a chip that's like 3 or 4 years old. And like recently they just made an announcement where every single new Qualcomm chip coming out will support the drivers for up to like 4 years, so that you could get theoretically 4 years worth of updates. We'll see how that pans out 4 years from now because it just started with this year, but with Google controlling the entire thing, you know that they can make it last longer because it will just be put the pressure on them to do it because they're the ones who are designing the drivers and things like that. So we may get to see support for up to like 5 years of Android updates, which would be fantastic. This would be matching what iOS does with their side. So yeah, that is one of the things that we will definitely see that might benefit a lot in terms of Google designing their own silicon. The other thing is we'll probably get things back like the neural core, like that'll just be built into the silicon now, because previously they bought the chip from Samsung, that was the CPU, and then they had to design this other chip, the neural core, and then they had to make sure that they talk to each other. Now that's just all going to be one chip. Like the neural core will just be built inside of the CPU. So that's awesome. Like that will make it so that things are just a little bit easier, things will process a little bit faster. And one thing that I'm really hoping for is that videos will get better on Pixel phones, because if they're controlling the entire pipeline, like they're controlling from the sensor all the way down to the processor and everything else around it, I'm really hoping that means that video is going to get better this year and photos will get better as well. Like, I'm just really hoping that's the case, because Google is starting to fall behind, and Google is really behind in terms of video, but they're starting to even fall behind in terms of photos, and especially like low light situations. That could be based on just the sensors they're using for the photos, but I'm really hoping that Google's own design processor will help out with that, but we'll just have to wait and see for that. These are the reasons I think it's important that Google is getting into it. Now, the other reason would be that maybe they can get a cheaper price for the silicon because they're designing it themselves. They'll still have to pay Qualcomm for the 5G modems and stuff, so it may just all even out in the end, and we may still get a phone in the Pixel 6 that is not quite top tier, but it's starting to get there. So that is one reason the Pixel 6 is exciting. Oh, the other reason it's exciting is the fact that the rumors say that there's going to be 2 versions of Pixel 6, and I'm really hoping we don't get a Pixel 5a 5G. Instead, we get a Pixel 6 and a Pixel 6 XL, because there are a lot of people who want a large phone, and it would be nice if the Google just, made a larger phone also. So yeah, that is some of the news with the Pixel lineup of phones. Those are some of the leaks that we've had, and honestly, I'm pretty excited about it, especially about the Google Silicon thing. Like, I'm really excited to see what that's all about, and I'm excited for the Pixel 5a, because if it's exactly like the Pixel 4a 5G, I think it's going to be a great phone. So yeah, with that, that's pretty much it for this video. Let me know what you guys think about this whole situation down in the comments below, and I will catch you guys in the next one. Bye!